Hey, and welcome to Neverwinter with Aragon. So with Module 25 launching on March the 28th, we'll be getting a new campaign. You'll be able to unlock that by picking up the Whispers in the Dark from Sergeant Knox in Protector's Enclave. But within its store, we should be able to go and obtain new gear, new legendary gear that has a whopping 2000 item level. Now, not all of these pieces of gear are going to be like best in slot. Only a few here and there. And then each of the gear pieces and the bonuses are completely different depending on the class. So for example, right here we have a set which is for the Warlock and the Wizard. Those are DPS characters. But then available exclusively for testing purposes, we can see all of the other sets that are for the different classes. So this is for the Rogue, the Cleric, the Bard, and the Ranger DPS. This is for your Barbarian and your Fighter tanks. This is for your Warlock and your Bard healers, and so on. So I've got to go through all of these different gear pieces, the bonuses that they provide, and check if they actually work. And there are here and there some of the best in slot items that endgame players are going to use. And if you're still progressing in this game, you'll be able to unlock the new campaign from day one regardless of your item level, as long as you've hit level 20. So you could jump in here and you could go and farm it and obtain this gear. It does have a bit of a heavy price tag though for newer players, 300,000 astral diamonds. So you might want to be cautious on that, and you might just be better off really picking up gear with the seals you obtain through your random dungeon and trials and skirmishes. That gear you pick up with the seals of like the dragon has a decent amount of item level and will get you into a bunch of content. I still recommend though going for dragon hunts ASAP and starting to work on getting the mythic gear from here. That's well worth it. So let's have a look at this legendary gear. So first things first, how do you obtain it? Well, again, it will be through that campaign. You'll have to go and buy it. We can see the costs, 300,000 extra diamonds, but then you need these glyphs of warding. They very simply come from just doing your quests within the zone. So repeatable quests will give you 12, weekly quests will give you 60, small heroics give you 10, major heroics will give you 20. Then you need these elite sigils, which again will just come from doing mini bosses, killing mini bosses in this new zone. Here's my map again of where all of them are located. Each boss will give you 2, but then you can partake in the lockdown event. After doing a bunch of quests in the zone, the bar under the mini map turns red, lockdown begins, and you can beat up these Drider House captains. There'll be 5 of them per lockdown event, and each one will drop you 6. And lastly, after making a certain amount of progress in the campaign, you'll have assassins which will come after you, and each assassin will give you 2 elite sigils. And lastly, you just need Mensa and Mint. That simply comes from doing your quests. Again, you will get 5 per repeatable quest, and you will get 25 for a weekly quest. Maximum per week you can obtain per character is 100. So let's move on to the bonuses that this gear can provide us. What gear pieces would you want to actually pick up? What should you consider going for? Now there's been a bunch of changes to the gear, and so in this document I'll go through the changes. You may have seen the gear pieces before, and yeah, they got updated. If you've seen the older versions, now you'll see the newer versions. But we'll start out with like the gear for your Barbarian and your Fighter DPS. The headpiece here just simply gives you a bunch of AP gain for the first 10 seconds when you start a fight. Pretty solid for AoE, I guess. Could work on some builds. I don't rate it too high. No change across that. And then the armor did get changed a little bit with regards to the stacks needed. You can get a total of 10% combat advantage, but a minus 7.5% to your critical avoidance through this. It's a good stepping stone armor piece, but from Dragon Hunts, there's armor which can give you a total of 15% statistics. Then the arms piece, pretty solid. It works. It can give you up to 7,500 accuracy ratings. Just be aware once you hit 20 stacks, they'll only last 10 seconds, and then they'll all expire before you have to get them all back again. Unless you take a hit and lose a stack and then refresh push the duration by gaining another stack again. The boots, no change, and yeah, just gives you 5% power when in combat, basically all the time, because you're a barbarian and a fighter. In most cases you'll be up close to your enemies and be attacking them, so that requirement of needing to be 25 feet or closer won't really matter to you unless you're wanting to use your mount power from afar or something. But we move on to the rogue, cleric, bard and ranger DPS. You start out with the helmet, giving you some accuracy when your stamina is over 75%. Works. Just be aware of how much stamina you're using. Just one quick dodge, unlike a rogue, a cleric, bard, will make it so that you get below 75% stamina for a few seconds. Rangers on the other side can probably dodge once without going down below 75%. Then the armor, it did get updated. You can see the headpiece did as well. The armor basically will give you a bunch of crit strike and crit severity when you're moving. I don't see it as all too useful. Again, from Dragon Hunts you can get ones that can much more easier give you a whole bunch of stats. The arms, no change there, but basically giving you a bunch of power per stacks. Works exactly like we just said with the barbarians one with the accuracy. And otherwise you have the boots, and the boots did get updated a little bit, you can see there, and now it will just give you a bunch of crit severity when you're close to your target, or forte when you're further away. And for a warlock and a wizard DPS, we have the headpiece. Works pretty solid. It's going to give you 7.5% power and 5% move speed. That's fine. I think in endgame though, people won't really be able to fit the power, and so kind of pointless, but it's an option if you're not running in the group with all tamed raptors. It did get updated, as again you can see there. The armor also got updated and will now give 7% additional damage. It's a damage buff, so it'll add to your other damage sources. And yeah, you need to have shield or temporary hit points in order to gain this. And it will affect just your ranged powers. So I tested that with like the battle tempered and it gave me that buff. The arms also got updated, and it does actually deal 250 magnitude damage. And it is surprisingly actually affected by everything except your crit. So it's not affected by the crit severity because it cannot crit. The boots then also work, and they were updated and basically give you 6% critical severity when your action points are 80% or less. I don't really see it as much point because you kind of want that crit severity for the artifact call. Move on to the paladin and cleric healer, and you can see there was no update to the headpiece. It'll still push away people when you use your daily power, and give a bunch of crit severity to yourself as well as your allies. The armor also works. It's a bit weird. I'll show a little bit more info towards the end of the video where I go over my test data, but basically it puts a bunch of orbs on the ground, and you can collect them to regenerate some hit points. You do have to lose like 50% of your max HP in one hit, not like consider the blocking as part of that. Then the arms, no change in them as well. Basically, you cast a bunch of single target heals and you can gain some crit strike, and I don't really see it as all too feasible. The boots then, also I don't see as great. Like, they have a chance, first of all, to trigger, and then they have a cooldown. And that would just give you a bunch of movement speed and crit strike ratings. Then you have the warlock and the bard heal, and they have a headpiece which is pretty interesting. However, it seems to be broken. It works for the bard DPS and also the warlock DPS, but for the healers it only gives like plus 15 out of 1,000 healer resource. So that's kind of silly. Really much effect. I wouldn't use it. The armor works, and this is probably the best in slot piece that exists in the entire collection of legendary gear. It creates an aura which just reduces the enemy's defense, awareness and critical avoidance by 3.5% when you're standing within 10 feet of them. You got to be right next to them, but you're basically increasing everybody's damage against the target. And it does work. I've tested it, and I'll show my test data later. But then you have the arms. They got updated, and you can see when you're damaged for 10% of your max HP in a single blow, you basically, your threat's immediately reduced and you gain a bunch of incoming and outgoing healing. Don't really see it as all too great. The boots also got a bit updated, just the tooltip mainly. Still works the same, still gives you 15,000 outgoing healing rating when against 10 targets. Don't really see it as all too feasible. You'd have to make an AoE only build pretty much for that. Then you have the tanks, paladin, barbarian and fighter. And the headpiece, no change and works as it says. I don't really see it at all too feasible. It doesn't seem to be affected by debuffs at all. It just does a flat 5%, not even mitigated by the enemy's defense, and that's just it. I don't think it's all too useful for threat. You're better off using the Manticore Bite Helmet from Dragon Hunts. The armor, another bit of a weird one, and I guess people could use it. Basically, you can chuck a bunch of orbs that regenerate people's action points. Whenever you're healed over 100% of your hit points, you have a 15% chance to put all those orbs down. I mean, they work, and you can use the orbs, like you can use 2 orbs because the orbs last for 20 seconds, and you can only be affected by 1 orb at a time. So once your effect of 1 orb is over, you could pick up another orb and gain basically a total of 20% of your action points. I think it's a bit weird and not really usable. Then the arms, just going to give you a bunch of awareness. However, whenever you strike an enemy, you lose the stack, so it's a bit weird. I don't see it as feasible because you'd have to be a tank who's not actually attacking and kind of need to attack to generate threat, so yeah. And then the boots. The boots work, but again, they're like a chance combined with a cooldown, and thus not great. They do give you the stats that they say, but again, not really reliable. That is all the legendary gear, all the bonuses. There'll be a link in the video description below where you can look through this yourself. But if you're interested in my test data, I'll scroll through that right here. You can see the different armor pieces there, different gear pieces. Like that's what the orbs will look like when you put them down, the ones that give you action points. And then you can scroll down some more here. You gain the different stat boosts. And then these are the healing orbs. So they're like a bit greener, and they'll heal you when you pick those up. You can scroll down some more and we'll find like the healer resource ones right here. You can see like the performance gain on the Bard healer and then the performance gain on the Bard DPS. You're basically gaining plus 15, and that is like a ton more effective when you have a total of like 150 and you go to 165 than compared to 1000 to 1015. I think it's a bit broken, and you do actually gain some more soul sparks. You can see it just there, like that's the soul spark gain. You gain that 15% more. Basically you gain the bar underneath it. So you can basically cast your Soul Scorch nearly twice in a row, basically using 3 pips each time. That's a total of, I believe, 6 seconds off your cooldowns to your encounters. So you can basically get the encounters off cooldown immediately. Then you can see the armor piece that reduces the enemy's stats. It's right here. We tested it and it was indeed working to increase our damage by reducing the enemy's stats. And that's great. And I think a Bard healer could definitely use this to buff the team's damage a bit more. I mean, a Warlock healer can also use it, of course. And that's about it. A bunch of other tests there. You can see the comparisons with the gaining the stats. You can see the damage test with the 7% damage buff, and also then the 250 magnitude. We got a bunch of hits there, done the math on that, and yeah, we could see then it was indeed getting affected by our certain stats. It just wasn't able to crit there at all. And that was about it. Hopefully this has been somewhat insightful to you guys with regards to the legendary gear. There are some useful pieces there you can check yourself, but I personally think, at least for endgame players who are mid-maxing their build, there are definitely better options than the majority of what's available. Some niche pieces of gear, in particular that gear piece for the Bard debuffing enemy stats, I think is great. A great option to support your team dealing more damage. And of course, you can use it on a Warlock DPS and you can use it on a Bard DPS. There's no reason you can't do that. Massive thank you again to all of these channel members for their continued support. You can support me as little as €1 a month by clicking the join button down below. And we'll see you guys around. Goodbye for now.